Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how many movement patterns you need, and specifically what you need in terms of movement patterns to avoid major muscle imbalances. And that includes both from a strength perspective and potentially an aesthetics perspective as well, and to be considered generally strong, all around strong, with any major strength or performance deficiency. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling on my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And I think a lot of people have this misconception out here that I promote only the big three or something because I have a powerlifting background, and I do look at people's strength standards in terms of things like squats and deadlifts, that I do consider those important movements. And if you're weak on either one of those, that I consider you to be a weak person. Just is what it is. But there's good reasons for that. But that being said, I have no problem with someone building a tremendous amount of muscle and strength without ever using the big three. I think they're good exercises. I think you can get a lot of mileage out of them. I don't think they're necessary as long as similar enough movement patterns are covered. So let me explain for you guys what 6 movement patterns you need to cover all the basics of strength and to not have any muscles that are particularly underdeveloped, particularly to a point to where you are risking injury. And to just be well-rounded in terms of your muscle balance, because that's what most people are looking for. Anyone who's not trying to compete in a physique competition, even those people for their looks, they just want to look well-balanced and look strong and fit and not have any glaring weaknesses, right? They don't want any muscle to stand out saying, oh man, that guy really doesn't have an upper chest. That guy really doesn't have triceps. He's all bicep, no tricep. You know, they don't want that. They want to look balanced. They want to look proportionate. So what you need are 6 basic movement patterns. And for those who don't understand, and again, I'm going to be specific in this. When I say a squat, I do mean a squat because a squat is a full body exercise, and we are looking for full body development. So there's going to be some sort of squat, some sort of hip hinge, some sort of horizontal press, a vertical press, a horizontal pull, and a vertical pull, right? That's what we're looking for. That covers every major muscle in the body, and it covers most of your basic movement patterns in terms of strength, in terms of how you would be tested in strength for any sport, and even general building a base for any strength sport. That's your 6 basic movement patterns, and that covers everything. And for those who don't believe me, we'll break down why that is in a minute, and let's look at what do I mean examples. What do I mean by a squat? Does that mean just a powerlifter squat? No. It could be a high bar squat, it could be a low bar squat, it could be a front squat. The point is you need to get strong, build a strength based on some sort of squat. A hip hinge could be a deadlift, it could be a conventional deadlift. It might in some cases be a sumo deadlift, Romanian deadlift, a power clean. All right, that's what I mean by a hip hinge, a movement where you hinge at the hip from the floor, usually lifting a barbell off the floor with a hip hinge. That's essential, absolutely essential for building your posterior chain and your lower back. Absolutely essential. And for building your entire thoracic or lumbar region. Absolutely essential. You are weak and you will have imbalances if you don't get good at one of those lifts. Horizontal press, we could mean a bench press. It could be a flat bench. It could be a closed grip bench. It could be a floor press. It could be a decline bench. It could be a mild incline bench, not a steep incline. It could be a weighted dip, right? Any of those. As far as a horizontal or vertical press, that's pretty straightforward. Overhead pressing, and I do mean with a barbell. Dumbbells do not elicit always the same response. And again, ideally, if you're trying to get all around strong and not develop muscle weaknesses, you should probably be doing that standing. In fact, I'm going to say that on most of these exercises, you are looking to be doing these exercises either standing or moving your body through space. The only exception I might make for those might be exercises that you have to lay on your back, a bench press, a floor press. But we could actually pull that out and you could hit these while having every single exercise. You do fall into that category of either be standing on your feet or moving your body through space with resistance. I don't mean just body weight, because again, you'll never get strong enough doing just your body weight. At the end of the day, you need to be able to add weight. But Then as far as pulling goes, when I say a horizontal pull, we mean a barbell row, T-bar row, Pendlay row, right? Where you're bent over. You're bent over and pulling towards your torso, right? And a vertical pull, a weighted chin up, a weighted pull up. All right, you need to get strong at one of those. You need to be strong at one of them. Now, as far as muscle imbalances go, what do I mean? You know of anyone who gets strong at it, who has an overhead press that is proportionate to their chest presses in terms of strength? And that's usually about 2/3, meaning if you can overhead press 2/3 of what you can bench press, you're balanced there. Who is also strong at horizontal pulling and vertical pulling? Who gets shoulder injuries? No, they're pretty rare, aren't they? Those people have a stable shoulder girdle. In fact, let's take the big three out. Let's say a person gets really strong at weighted dips, the standing press, the strict press, just called the press historically. You start with the bar on your chest, press it up over your head while standing, right, with your knees locked. A Pendlay row and a weighted chin up, right? Let's say we take those four for those four upper body movements. Anybody who is really strong on any of those, do they have any heads of their delt usually lagging? No, they usually have all three heads of the delt. They're usually reasonably developed. Now, one of them might not be as amazing as another aesthetically. There's a genetic component. There's drugs involved. Keep in mind, most bodybuilders inject stuff in their delt, so that creates a different proportion from what people expect to see. So I'm talking about people who aren't using drugs. But comparing people who don't inject anything into their body to other people who don't inject anything into their body, they're unlikely to have any of those heads lagging. They're unlikely to have a shoulder imbalance that's going to lead to injuries. They're going to tend to have decent trap development, aren't they? Right? Even their traps are going to be developed. Their entire shoulder girdle is going to be fairly well balanced if they're strong at all four. You ever seen anyone who's really strong at the strict press off their chest and the weighted dip who lacks chest development? No, their upper chest is usually proportionate to their lower chest. They're not lagging up here. Particularly if they're good at chin-ups also. Chin-ups actually work the upper chest. Same thing with arms. Ever met anyone who's really strong at weighted chin-ups and rows who doesn't have biceps, brachialis, or iliobrachialis? They might not be bodybuilder contest level, but do you see small biceps and small brachialis on someone who's good at both? Particularly if they do one exercise supinated and the other pronated. Like if they do chin-ups and an overhand row, that whole area is usually pretty decently well developed. Seen anyone who's strong at both weighted dips and overhead pressing, and I mean really strong, who has small triceps? Because those horizontal presses work two heads of the tricep more, but the overhead pressing brings the long head in more. Right? That head that tends to lag from the chest press, it tends to get additional stimulation with full range of motion overhead pressing. Right? And we know standing press is actually, based on EMG data, work the triceps more than any other overhead press. When you're standing with a barbell, it actually gives tremendous tricep recruitment. But the overhead, because again the angles involved, tends to bring the long head in more, which tends to be most people's lagging head. So if someone is strong at both, they're strong at both, they don't tend to have lagging tricep development, do they? And that's the point with all this. Same thing, you ever seen anyone who is strong at a hip hinge, whether it's a deadlift, a clean, a chin up, and a row, who doesn't have full back development? They usually have a V taper, and they have a thickness and dimension to their back, because the rows and the hip hinges build a lot of the smaller underlying musculature, the thoracic erectors, traps, all that stuff up, while still building the lats. And then the the vertical pull tends to create better lats, right? That's more lat direct, so they tend to get the V taper and the thickness and everything all the way around. They'll have a well-rounded back development. I'm not saying people might not need to focus on their weak points, but Usually the idea with classic aesthetics wasn't about classic aesthetics developed because of what we thought was pleasing. Classic aesthetics developed around what we knew was athletic and well-rounded. In other words, someone who was strong and fit and had proportionate strength tended to look a certain way when they got fairly lean. As far as their muscle development goes, there's a certain look that we look at and know that that person is all around athletic, that they're strong through quite a few different ranges of motion, that they have a well-developed musculature because they are strong. They're strong and they don't have glaring weaknesses. That's where the classic aesthetics came from. Balanced athletes who were fit through multiple planes and ranges of motion. They were all around strong. That's what produced that original aesthetics once they were lean enough to see the musculature. You don't always know what's under someone's body fat, who's at a higher body fat and strong. Can't always tell, but when they're leaner, you can tell. That's where that idea came from. That's where the classic aesthetic look came from. It's someone who is good and has a good strength base, and they do enough volume through those 6 basic planes of motion, they're going to tend to be relatively well developed. And it'll even be the same thing with the lower body. They're going to have quad and hamstring development that's fairly proportionate. They're going to have strong hips, strong glutes. They're going to be less likely to get hurt on a playing field because they have more stable knees. They have more stable hips. Again, you're looking at being more athletic, more rounded, and not having weaknesses. There's your key. And if you want to know where you're most likely to be weak at, aesthetically even, you need only look at where your performance lags in those 6 basic movement patterns. If you have one that is glaringly weaker than the others, likely you're really good at rows but you suck at chin-ups, or you're really strong at the pull-up but you're bad at rows or deadlifts, you know where your posterior weaknesses lay. You know what you need to work on. You know what you need to work on without even seeing it in the mirror, because you most likely have an underlying muscular imbalance that's a result from not training hard enough or enough work or getting strong enough through a basic plane of motion. It's movement patterns that build muscle mass. It's movement patterns that build strength. So there you have it, guys. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.